Hi, we're here with Jim Van Voorhis. He's the VP of Education for Glean EDU. Glean is a really interesting AI unicorn in the B2B space, and they're just making waves and moves into the education space. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So first off, tell us what Glean AI is.
Yeah. So Glean is a work AI platform. So imagine having your own internal Google search plus a ChatGPT component, but it's integrated into all of your enterprise applications. So we become the knowledge base for all of your corpus of data. We also understand who your users are, so users can comprehensively search for information in Glean. They can also disseminate that information using the AI assistant, and they can automate their workflows using our agentic platform.
Yeah, and that means it integrates with things like Slack and Zoom and Google Drive.
O365, Box, Dropbox, Salesforce, ServiceNow, and the list goes on, right? So the value proposition of Glean is really in the breadth of data that we can collect and present to users in a digestible way.
Yeah, so you can imagine that is a very useful capability for not just businesses, but also educational institutions, especially higher ed institutions, very big, complicated places with lots of internal data. So tell us about the higher ed offering.
Yeah, so first and foremost, in education, they're facing a lot of complexities with how they get access to information. And a lot of them are thinking about, well, how do we get information from the internet? But they're just now starting to pivot and think about, how do we get access to our internal data? Right? And so, we're solving a really human problem here that everybody runs into, where it's hard to find information, it's hard to make use of that information, and it's even harder to automate your day with that information. So what we're doing is we're engaging strategically with the education community to talk about the use cases that Glean can support, whether it's teaching and learning or administrative or research-based or healthcare focused, right? There's a lot of ways that Glean can be applied to allow users to do more with less and essentially improve efficiency and productivity so that they can focus more on their day-to-day versus accomplishing remedial tasks. So it really comes down to that partnership that we're enabling to allow universities and colleges to fully deploy Glean across their entire campus of faculty, staff, and students, and really kind of gathering the use cases from there and helping to evangelize that through the community.
Yeah, I mean, we've entered this information environment where it's very easy to make new information. It's very easy to send Slack messages, make Google Docs, make things in Box, put together all sorts of new documents. But then there's this information overload. They're all buried. You have to look for that doc. When somebody leaves an organization, they have 1,000 documents that they've created or worked on. And one of the things you mentioned is permissioning, which I think is a really important part of this. So, Glean knows who a user is. So if they're a student or a faculty member or an admin or somebody in a particular department, they'd have access to certain types of information and maybe not other information like financial information or inside, the conversations between the executives or the provost and the deans. The students wouldn't have access to that. How do you make sense of that information ecosystem and make sure everybody has access only to what they need?
Great question, and it's one of the common concerns that we're hearing about the most when it comes to AI adoption, right? There's a lot of excitement around AI, but there's also a lot of fear. And what we need to do is we need to kind of alleviate that fear by, one, starting with the product design. So first and foremost, Glean is built to inherit existing permissions that already exist, right? So whether that user is a student who should have access to course curriculum, but not the answers to the test, right? They're not permitted to access that already, so Glean would never present that information to that user. So from a data security and governance perspective, Glean has kind of already stepped ahead of that by creating that permission-aware structure, as well as allowing the universities to actually host it in their own VPC. So they have full control of the data. They also have full control over the permissioning, and so that there's no issues around improper access to information.
And I would imagine that one of the complexities, but sort of also the value propositions for university is these are sprawling, they're almost like cities, right? There's thousands and thousands of people, they're in different departments, lots of administrators, lots of faculty, lots of researchers and graduate students, and all these different populations and different populations of data. When you go work with a higher education institution, I imagine there's an onboarding process that basically says, let's find all of these pockets of data and where they are throughout, whether they're transcripts from calls or whether they're huge sets of curricular data or syllabi. How does that work? How do you work with universities to organize their data?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, like a lot of that work is work that they're already focused in on, right? So like our job is more to present that information, but also work with them strategically to understand, like, from a data security perspective, like what do you want to expose? What don't you want to expose, right? Like there's really sensitive institutional data that they can't, allow users to get access to in certain groups, right? So, it really does come down to that collaboration and education that we provide to our customers about, hey, here is what you're exposing your users to, unless if you implement XYZ governance policy. So it really, it's obviously institution by institution, right? Like if you talk to a healthcare focused University of California health system, for example, right? Like they obviously care a lot about their PHI and sensitive data like that, whereas like a college that's just focused on research is going to have different compliance standards. So it really just depends on the customer that we're working with, but what it comes down to is that collaboration, right? Like the understanding of how the platform works, how to deploy it, and how to secure it.
Yeah. So last question for you, and just to make this really concrete, because I think it's, seeing your demo and how you work, that you've thought about a lot of use cases for this type of information, sort of internal information search. Give us sort of a walkthrough of a sort of, if you have an institution, a higher institution that's totally Gleanified, where everything's interconnected, what is a day in the life of a student? How can they use all the data they have access to, and what's a day in the life of a faculty member or administrator?
Yeah, I mean, I just think about all the things that, being a former student myself, right? Like all the things that I used to wake up and do to prepare myself for my day, right? Like, tell me all the classes I need to go to today. Tell me about the homework assignments that I need to complete. Tell me about the curriculum that I need to figure out. Tell me how to get access to all my campus resources like Student Health Center or Campus Bookstore, right?
Services.
And so all of this information is available within the database, but again, back to the human element of things, like if I can't find something fast, then I might just give up altogether. Or express frustration, submit an IT support ticket, right? So it's about that. It's about getting that access to information fast and easy so that I can plan my day and my week and my month accordingly, so that I can get access to the resources that I need to, complete my curriculum efficiently, right? Like that's really where I see Glean stepping in, is becoming almost like the best executive assistant that everybody has ever had, right? Like somebody who knows everything about the college or university environment and can answer questions like that and provide information very fast.
Would include work study and study abroad, financial aid,
exactly.
and athletics schedules and practice schedules. And I mean, I can imagine there's a huge amount of different
There's
things.
probably hundreds of if not thousands of use cases that can potentially be supported with Glean.
And what about the faculty admin side? What would that look like? What are some of the things they would
think
do?
about curriculum development, think about administering policy, think about onboarding employees and students for that matter, right? So like, think about all the work that goes into all that, all the information that is exchanged as a result of all that effort, right? Like imagine being able to streamline those processes. Every time you onboard a new employee, they don't have to go to their manager to ask them questions about every little thing, PTO policy, leave policy, this and that, right? Like it's all available at your fingertips, right? It kind of reduces the amount of, questions that I would need to ask my manager, so I can get onboarded a lot more efficiently.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's really exciting. So what have you made of the show so far? There's so many different, you're in the higher education zone, a bunch of different really interesting vendors and people doing things in higher ed. What has been stood out for you?
The show's been fantastic. I love that the show represents a mixture of higher education and K through 12 and education tech companies, and big companies like Google and Meta are here. ASU obviously paving the way, right? I'm very impressed by the show. This is actually Glean's first year at the show. I can almost guarantee you that we will be coming back next year in a bigger and more supportive way. We kind of dipped our toes in this show. We like what we see, so we'll most likely be back.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much. This is Jim Van Voorhis. He is the VP of Education at Glean AI, just launching Glean EDU. Thanks for being here with us on EdTech Insiders.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful.